Hey, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, where we are going to be talking about a first look at Agentic AI in the Noodle Factory platform inside of your courses. Now, today is really targeted at those of you who are already using Noodle Factory in your teaching, in your facilitation, however you're using Noodle Factory. The goal here is to encourage you to take a very close look at these capabilities and to turn them on inside of the agents, the courses that you already have deployed inside of Noodle Factory. By the way, I should introduce myself. Hi, I'm Jim Wagstaff. If we've not met before, I'm one of the co-founders of Noodle Factory. What we're going to talk about today is really related to something that's an emerging conversation, an ongoing conversation. This is real. This is not a roadmap item. This is not a concept. This is something that we've been talking about with our existing clients for quite a long time. I say a long time, maybe the last 6 months or so. And we have rolled this out gradually over the last 4 months, roughly. And now this is something that's available to every user of Noodle Factory. We're going to talk through that thought process of how we tried to rethink the use of Agentic AI in education and how that can benefit both educators and learners. We'll show you how this works, how you can turn it on, and also give you an idea of what some of our early adopter clients have been doing as they've tested this capability. And we'll talk to you about what early access looks like. As I mentioned, this is already available to anybody who would like to engage in it. But that is the goal, is to get you to really think about turning it on. I'll show you the way it looks and the way the experience is on the user side is dramatically better, I think. So you be the judge of that and see if you would like to test this. So let me start out with a question. All of you are using an AI chatbot, I'm sure, whether it's ChatGPT, Google, Claude increasingly, or maybe even Walter inside of Noodle Factory. And you might have thought, this is helpful, but it requires the student to engage. And so is it really teaching? Is it really acting like a teaching assistant? And that's absolutely right. It hasn't been, in that sense, a teaching assistant. That observation is exactly what caused us to go down this pathway. Is if we want Walter inside of Noodle Factory to be a teaching assistant, we really need Walter to be much more proactive, like you would be, even in a tutoring session. So today, as we know, most AI in education, including Walter previously, is reactive. It waits for the learner to ask a question, it answers that question, and then it waits again. Even in a role play, there's only a certain amount of proactivity that has been utilized or programmed in. But we know in teaching and in facilitation, there is a structure, there are learning outcomes, there's a lesson plan, very likely, that we're teaching to. And a teacher or a tutor has awareness of the progress that has been made. There's also prompts, or sorry to overuse that word maybe, but there are questions, maybe in a Socratic form, and timely reinforcement that happens for that learner. And that's differentiated and adapted in the classroom and the workshop. So there's a guidance that's happening, not just a response that's going on. So clearly, that requires a rethink, a different direction, if we're going to use AI to teach in this way. Now, way back when we started on this journey in 2018, thinking about how to use AI in teaching and learning, we had in mind, we didn't want to just build a chatbot. We wanted to do something that could guide learning in that thoughtful way that an educator does. So early on, but now this has become more of a reality, we're constantly thinking about how do we get the system to be more observant of the learner and how they're tracking in their learning journey. What have they covered? Where are they strong? Where do they have gaps? And how do you engage at just the right moment? So secondly, how do you, based on those observations, decide what sort of support is needed, what sort of intervention is needed? And that probably isn't just content. That's about asking the right questions. And when there is content involved, using the content in the right way at the right moment. And then thirdly, the thought process is, well, how do we guide and adapt based on the student need or the gap that has been identified? So in other words, how do you act on that plan? very crucially, how do you adjust and keep the learner in what's called their zone of proximal development, where it's never too hard, it's never too easy, but you're moving the learner along the pathway towards achieving the learning outcomes. And so that is what has led us, and that last part is really important. That's what has led us to this moment in time where, through lots of engagement and feedback with our existing clients, we now have a way to do that. So let's just take a quick look at how agentic AI tutors work. Without getting too technical, let's look into the mechanics. How does this actually work inside of Noodle Factory? Well, it all starts with your course. Like everything that we do in Noodle Factory, it all starts with your content. There are a couple of new things and nuanced things that we've added into this process, though. When we start with your course, it's the materials and the structure in those course, plus the learning outcomes that guides the agent. So this is not having AI go off and invent things or come up with its own curriculum like you might see in a more general purpose AI tool. But this is working within the framework that you've already built. It's represented in the materials, your slides, notes, reading, and the AI is learning from those. And you can organize your topics into sequence, and then the AI is going to respect that sequence. Now, when we add learning outcomes to that, that reinforces the sort of structure that you've got in place. You decide what mastery looks like for each topic or module, and then the AI is going to work within those goals in the context of the learning outcomes. So this is the fundamental point. The teaching ownership, as always, stays with you. The AI is a tool for you. It's not there to replace your judgment. It's there to align with the way that you intend to teach. What we're doing here is supporting progression, not just supporting accurate responses. The accurate responses are important because very likely your students are going to continue to come to Noodle Factory for answers or for practice or to engage ad hoc in, let's say, exam preparation. But here's how the flow works in practice when an agentic approach is involved. So the learner engages with the material. They could start with a topic. They might work through a few questions. Maybe they do a role play. They do some reading on the topic, separate and apart from what they're doing in the learning management system. The AI is observing that progress. So it's not surveillance. It's not really tracking them from a punitive perspective. It's looking to see, are they answering the questions correctly? Are they demonstrating clear understanding across that topic? And when the agent identifies a gap, maybe the learner's got a simple misconception, maybe they've skipped a foundational topic or concept, it's then going to step in with some targeted reinforcement. Then it will adapt, and if that reinforcement works, well, great. Then we move on and we go to something different. But if the learner has skipped a foundational concept, then and they're starting to miss out on some of the key learnings, it's going to try a different approach until the learner starts to show a level of mastery in that particular context or area. So this is a really key difference between answering questions and guided learning. The AI has a destination in mind. Those are the learning outcomes that have been set, and it's actively helping the learner to get there. So here's how the teaching ownership stays with you in that context. You might be thinking, well, that sounds great, but I don't want the AI to make decisions about what the student is going to learn. That needs to stay with me. We completely agree. And that is the sort of conversation that we've been having with early adopters of this agentic capability in Noodle Factory. The definition of the curriculum, the outline of the curriculum, the topics, the sequencing, the learning outcomes, that's all set by you. Now, you can get some help from AI on setting those. We work a lot with adjunct faculty, and they may need a little bit of help designing the learning outcomes, and that's perfectly fine. But the decision about what the learning outcomes are, what are the guide rails or guardrails and guideposts that are being used, that's all set by you, those boundaries. You decide what the AI covers and how it responds. You see the data, you see the learner progress that's visible in your dashboard, and you always know what's happening. So you're in control. This is a term that I like to use. It's a pedagogically bounded learning environment. So, in the most positive way, it's a walled garden. Walled gardens typically have a negative connotation, but in this sense, that pedagogically bounded learning environment is set up in the way that works best for you. The agentic mode that we're going to look at, it's a switch. You can turn it on or you can turn it off. It's completely up to you. We have not turned on agentic mode by default. That's a decision that you need to make. So think of it this way: the AI doesn't replace your teaching, it's meant to really amplify it. It's meant to extend your reach so that when you're not there at 2 o'clock in the morning and a student, for whatever reason, is not sleeping, they're learning, it extends your reach at that point in time without having to be there at that late hour. Obviously, you couldn't be, but it gives you that sort of reach from a tutoring perspective. All right, so enough talking. Let me show you what we are talking about. I'll show you a recorded example just so you can see a rapid fire view of the setup. And then I'll show you a live example that I've got in a course that I've set up. So we'll start from scratch by uploading some reading materials. So this is the dashboard that you know and love. So we've got our reading materials in there. We're going to create a new knowledge group. In this case, it's a fashion marketing course, I believe. So we're going to add some material in there. We drag in, this is probably a textbook or a portion of a textbook, open source textbook. And that will contextualize. So once that's done, then what we've got is our contextualized chat has been set up. If you've been using Noodle Factory, this will look very familiar. Then we can come in and add our learning outcomes. Now, this is something we've had in place for quite a long time. You're able to draw the learning outcomes directly from the content. In this case, I'm getting some help with my learning outcomes. If I already have my learning outcomes, I can just upload those via a document that contains those learning outcomes. But in this case, I'm looking for some help. And so via the content, I've been able to get some suggestions on learning outcomes. Now, we're doing this in a really rapid fire way. If you are unfamiliar with Noodle Factory, we'll have another webinar that focuses on agentic that goes through this in a greater level of detail, showing you the setup and so forth. But because you are an educator who's already using Noodle Factory, we're moving pretty quickly. Now, if you haven't used this capability, this is relatively new. I think we've had this in the platform for maybe a year now. You can also bring a lesson plan to the platform. So simply copy and paste or type in what is the lesson structure that you want to have. This can be as macro as you'd like. It could be at a textbook level, let's say, or a course level, or it can be as micro as you like, the topic that you're covering. But in this case, we've got a lesson structure that's very focused. It's about a 15-minute lesson that students will engage in. Now, let's look at what the agentic capability brings us once we turn that on. So if we go to the agent, and I'll show you this live in a moment, there's the switch. All we have to do is turn on the agentic mode, and now we're basically done. That's all we have to do. Save your settings. And when we go into the learner mode, let's take a look at that now. What does the learner see? And if you've been using Noodle Factory for a while, this is a different look. I love this user interface, this user experience. It's the typical chat interface, but the way it looks, the way I'm able to see my progress, that we'll take a look at in a moment, it's fundamentally different from what we've had before. Now, in the background, all of this engagement that I'm having within the content is being observed. It's being tracked. Not to surveil the student, but to understand where are their gaps in knowledge, how are they progressing, and are we able to redirect them or keep them in their zone of proximal development. And there we go. So as a learner, now remember, this is the learner view, I can see the progress and the feedback on each of those subjects. So classically, if I'm gaining access to a tutor, these are the sorts of things I want to understand. How am I tracking against the expectations in those learning outcomes? What's the feedback that you would give me as a tutor if you're a human tutor? So in this case, real time, in the moment, I'm able to get that directly from the platform itself. Now, I want to switch over to take a look at a live view. So again, just kind of reinforce this. So this is an agent that I set up on sports nutrition. If you've been to other webinars, this is my agent, NutriSensei. So that you'll probably recognize NutriSensei. So I want to show you. I'm not in agentic mode right now. So let me just go over to the learner view, non-agentic mode. So I was already doing something. I was getting into a role play. And so this looks okay, but this is the non-agentic mode. And I can just do my normal chat here, continue with my role play. But let me go back over and just switch the agentic mode on. I'm going to save those settings. Now, I've done nothing else. If I go to the learner view, so now look, the interface is different. So I can start by going down a tutoring pathway on nutrition basics or on sports nutrition. So there we go. I can see here my learning outcomes. So it's a very different look, and see how it's organized the content dynamically for me around those learning outcomes. So really, really interesting, I find. And as a learner, trying to put myself in the learner's shoes, this is something that I really think can help spark students to come back into the platform again and again. We know students are going to use things like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini. That will always be there, but we want to give them a reason to come back into the Noodle Factory platform beyond maybe an assignment that you have put into the learning management system that involves Noodle Factory. As a tutor, as an exam prep partner, this agentic capability is a real draw for students, and that's the sort of feedback that we've gotten. Okay, before we run out of time, let me just give you a sense of the educators that are already using and have been testing this agentic mode out over the last several months in their courses. Here are some of the patterns that we're seeing. Here's some of the feedback that we've gotten. So the very first thing that people have said is, this is great for course review and revision. Several educators have been using agentic mode for quite some time now, and it's helping learners to get ready for high stakes assessments. So as you know, we don't encourage the use of Noodle Factory for summative assessments, but think of these as micro assessments or integrative assessments. The AI is there to reinforce weak areas, so learners aren't just reading through the same material again and again. They're actually getting targeted support and tutoring and focusing on the areas that they need help with. So it saves them time potentially, makes them more efficient, and it increases the likelihood of solid learning outcomes. Secondly, the self-paced modules. So dynamic, self-paced. This is particularly popular for asynchronous or flipped classroom content, where the AI is guiding learners through the material with that structured progression and built-in checkpoints and quizzes like a teaching assistant, but it's 24/7. Thirdly, and this is the one that really resonates with every educator that has used the agentic capability so far and that I've spoken with, it's reducing repetitive Q&A. Socratic engagement is great, but if it's repetitive, if it's not seen as valuable by the student, then that's one thing. For you, what that also means is the questions that you answer again and again, those questions that are coming and you could use probably an automated response. Essentially, that's what this can be for you. How much of your time is spent answering those same questions again and again? This is going to allow you to free up that time, focus on higher value interactions in the classroom that really do need a human. In this case, the AI agent can take care of that and maybe even anticipate that. So here's what we're learning. I want to be really transparent with you on this. This is early. This is, even if you look at the general purpose AI tools like Claude or Perplexity, the agentic capability is pretty early. It's exciting, but we're still learning. We're evolving. And that's why your engagement and feedback is so important. What we are seeing is pretty encouraging. Learners are coming in more consistently when there is structure and they're seeing their progress, when it's very visible. They're not just chatting with a bot. They're not just coming in and getting questions answered, but they're really working through that guided experience. Educators are telling us that they value the visibility in what students are doing. So they can see what's happening between classes, where learners are strong, where they need help. And this information, it's different from what you would typically get from a chatbot. Certainly a general purpose chatbot, unless you have an enterprise-wide deployment of that, and even this would be doubtful, you're probably not going to see what students are doing. Even with Noodle Factory, you'd certainly get a lot of data and a lot of analytics, but this is a different type of data. It's progression data. It's progression against learning outcomes, something that you haven't necessarily seen in the past. So this combination of AI, I'll call it agency, giving the AI some control, coupled with the guardrails that you supply, so educator control as well. It's that balance that's also resonating. As we talked about, educators don't just want AI making these unilateral decisions about what students are learning, or reinforcement or interventions with students. They want AI that's more capable than a Q&A chatbot, but they also want the control. And maybe most importantly, the early feedback that we're getting from our testing groups is it's actively shaping how we refine the student experience. It's actively shaping as well how we are developing our product. So this isn't finished. We're unveiling a capability that is really relatively new. It's evolving, and it's a capability that we want to continue to develop, but only in partnership with educators like you. All right, so let's have a look at what's next. We have been in the early access period, so where do we go from here? And if you would like to get involved in this, if you haven't been using the agentic mode, let me explain what you can do. So right now, and this is not just coming soon, this is actually today, we have widened out access to the agentic capability. So all you need to do is go in to your administrator dashboard, go to the agent settings, and turn on the agentic capability. If you need any help with that at all, reach out to your assigned learning success manager. They can help you with that, but it's that simple. Just turn on the switch. General availability, so the broader rollout is happening as we speak. We are, as I said, constantly evolving this. We're on a 2-week development cycle, so the feedback that you give us today, it's very likely that could make its way into the product within a month. So we want to hear from you, both how you like the agentic mode, but what are the ideas that you have about what we can do further, because that rollout is always continuing. Okay, so that is the end of our time today. And I want to thank you for taking the time to join us. That's our web address. There's our contact information, the general mailbox. I will see that as well. So if you send a message there, if you've got any questions, either drop us an email, put the questions or comments into the chat in YouTube or into the comment section here on YouTube. But we thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again on another webinar very soon, or speaking to you directly about some of these emerging agentic capabilities that are happening right now. Thanks, everybody.